reading from the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim. And the Rambam proceeds to give different references out the Torah that refer to these events. Specifically, a lot of them, I would say, the single biggest source, by the way, is from Parshas Balak in the prophecy of Bilam. That's the most rich source of messianic prophecies in the Torah itself, like not in the prophets. I'm talking about like the 5 books of Moses. So it says the Rambam in Halacha Gimel, Al Ya'aleh Al Da'atcha She'Hamelech HaMashiach Tzarich La'asos Osos U'Moftim. Do not think that the messianic, the is never called anywhere, not in the Torah, not in the prophets, as the Mashiach. It is a rabbinic term that, ironically, pounded by the non-Jews to describe their version of that thing, but it is not anywhere in the entire Torah.
It's like the Mandela effect. Seriously, really?
No, not once in the entire Torah. The word Mashiach comes up, is used a few dozen times in the Torah. The word HaMashiach, and it is never once used to refer to that person. It's always being used to refer to either the priests, exactly, the Kohanim, or someone who's been anointed, someone who's been physically anointed. Most kings weren't anointed. As we know, the law of anointed, there is an anointing of kings, but it's only the first in a line of kings. So David HaMelech was anointed. As we know, Shmuel anoints him, and then his descendants don't need to be anointed anymore.
Wasn't Shlomo anointed?
Oh, there you go. The Gemara asked that question. Why was Shlomo anointed? If that's controversy about him being the king, he usurped the kingship. So in order to publicly demonstrate the fact that he was the only legitimate king, so that's why he was anointed. But he didn't need to be anointed. That's a good question. The Gemara asked that question. So it says the Rambam, don't think that the king needs to be this supernatural character, and to change the order of the world, or even to resurrect the dead. Meaning, part of this process of the world being corrected is that there will eventually be a revivification of the dead, as the Rambam famously adds in his list of principles. But the Mashiach doesn't need to be the one to do that. And all other sorts of things that the fools say. This is not true. Rabbi Akiva Chacham Gadol, Rabbi Akiva, who was a great sage, of the sages that composed the Mishnah. He was the arms bearer of Ben Kuziba, the king, otherwise known as Bar Kokhba, the individual who led the Bar Kokhba rebellion. It's interesting that the Rambam uses this term, by the way, that he was the Nosei Kelev, he was the weapons bearer of this person. I don't know if that means literally he was the weapons bearer, but it's very strange to say. It's very interesting, very noteworthy that he says he was his weapons bearer, that he participated, like in some hands-on way. Maybe Akiva participated in this, not just telling everyone to go, not just telling everyone to participate. I think this guy is legit. He wasn't just the ideological head of it, which he clearly was, and we have very powerful indications from that, and from Chazal and from history, which is why he was executed eventually by the Romans, because he led this huge rebellion, the most costly rebellion in Roman history. Right? But it wasn't just that he was the ideological head; he was very hands-on involved in this. V'hu haya omer alav, and he said regarding this person, Shehu HaMelech HaMashiach, that he was in fact this character that the prophets told would arise in the end of days. And he and all the other sages of his generation, Shehu HaMelech HaMashiach, they all were in agreement. Meaning all the sages were in agreement with Rabbi Akiva. Ad shenerag ba'avonos, until he was eventually killed in his sins. And as the Rambam explains, this is important to know practically, although it's not directly related to our topic here. But the Rambam proceeds to explain that there are two distinct stages to the messianic process. There's a point in time where you can assume that a person is in fact this character, the Mashiach. He calls it Bechezkas Mashiach. You can assume that he is in fact the Mashiach. How do we know? When can we assume that he's in fact the Mashiach? When he begins this process, when he's able to wage war against the enemies of the Jewish people, when he's able to gather a following, a political following amongst the Jewish people. When he's able to establish himself as the leader of the Jewish people, he's Bechezkas Mashiach. And then once he fulfills all the prophecy in the exiles, then you know he's the Mashiach for sure. That's what the Rambam is saying, that this person, Bar Kokhba, was Bechezkas Mashiach. He had the status of Chezkas Mashiach. What?
Netanyahu.
Who?
Does it make Netanyahu?
Just make the Netanyahu? Well,
I don't think he has any sites.
Exactly. I think someone who says that who openly declares that they're not intending, I think he's kind of invalidated himself. So anyway,
God once in his speech, he said, God, twice, said, God bless America, God bless Israel. That was the only mention of God.
okay, well, that's two more than other people are saying. So it's
also a picture of him with the pillow on.
It would be funny if he
Yeah,
kind of pulled
just
off the
saying.
mask and says,
He
"I really
posted-
yes."
He posted it.
no. So the os that we're doing right now is it's very much the os shin is very much wrapping up the theme of the Tagin itself. It's not it's I would say it's mostly focused on the theme of the crowns that we've been talking about until now and kind of bringing it all home, as opposed to focusing on the letter shin. Although he does obviously focus on the letter shin, but the theme is very much wrapping up the big concept of what the Tagim represent. So says Rav Kook, and this is actually quite a long section, correct? Like the ayin and the tzadi, they have more than one side. It's always next to the letters. So he talked about how the shin is comprised of 3 letters. On the far, there's a zayin. So you have yud, vav, and zayin coming together like in a bundle at the bottom. And it's like someone's holding. It's like someone made a lulav out of a yud, a vav, and a zayin. Yeah. And these letters are very symbolically important. We've come across this idea over and over again that there are like these base form letters, and those forms are basically yud, vav, which is able to defend against all threats from the outside. So these 3 concepts that he's talking about are the yud, the harayon, mispari, excuse me, I said quantitative, I meant qualitative. The idea of the qualitative emerging from a group coalescing together. That's the concept of yud. Yud 10, and the tzibur, the congregation,